Good morning, Rick.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks. How about you?
Good, good. So, full disclosure, you're one of my favorite people. We've known each other for a long, long time. You are our entrepreneur in residence at the Moncton campus for a few years and have done a lot of professional development for us with Oasis. But what are you doing now?
Right now, I'm doing working with the CBDC in Westmoreland, Albert, helping them with their business development seminars. So anyone who's interested in a new business, going through a 2-week virtual presentations of various aspects of what it means to get into business. And I'm doing consulting work with clients around North America on marketing efforts and helping them grow their businesses.
Awesome. And you've had your hand, you've been a restaurant owner, you've been a corporate marketing director. So, marketing is your jam, right?
Yeah, well, I started as an accountant,
Oh, right.
right? So I was an
Forgot that
accountant
part.
before I became a marketing guy.
That's right. I forgot about that part. But you and I chat a lot about, and you've helped a lot of the MBCC students think about the importance of a plan. And that's usually how we always started the conversation at MBCC with any student who wanted to start their own business. But it's not just, the conversation wasn't always just for students. But so can we talk a little bit about, business basics and the importance of starting with a plan?
Yeah, well, the first thing you have to remember is starting a business is there's a level of risk involved. And so you're either putting in money, you're putting in time, you're trying to get someone else's money to invest in you. And you're also looking at opportunity. So, if you're starting a business, you're taking away from the opportunity maybe that you could make money somewhere else. So you have to factor all that in. So when you're looking at starting a business and you're factoring that in, you have to decide, okay, is this going to be successful? And I mean, the stats are out. There's 85% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. So if you know that most businesses fail, then why the hell would anybody ever want to start a business?
Right.
Right? I mean, the stats are there. And the answer is, well, because people want to start businesses. They're looking for something else in their lives, whether they don't want to have a boss, whether they want to have a certain amount of freedom, whether maybe they think there's more money available to them as they start their own business. But they start them because they see opportunity, whatever that opportunity might look like. And so if you don't have a plan, you're basically going in blind, right? And who wants to start something blind? Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it just forces you to ask questions. Like, okay, the number one question I get from people all the time when they're starting businesses is, will this work? Like, I don't know. Like, will it work? What's the research? What information have you gathered? Like, besides your own personal observations, will it work? Depends on you, depends on the market, depends on the funding, depends on cash flow, like depends on if are there enough customers out there? What's the competitions look like? I mean, if there's 15 competitors in the market and you're going to come in and say, oh, my product's going to be better, it's probably not going to work.
Right.
Unless you've got $1 million in the bank and you're willing to wait out the other competitors until they all go away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so there's a lot of questions that have to be answered. The plan forces you to think about some of those answers.
Okay. So there's tons of templates out there. A lot of people search and say, I need the right template, but you don't necessarily need, a full, PDF template to go in. What are some of the top things that people should make note of when they're starting that plan?
First thing I would tell people is they need to look at their income statement. And I know for some people starting businesses, they're like, accounting, I don't understand accounting, or I don't know what is an income statement. Well, the income statement is actually not that hard to do. It takes a little bit of focus and a little bit of, thinking, okay, well, how many people do I think I can serve, or how many products can I sell? And looking at revenues and looking at expenses and understanding what are all the revenues and expenses. Revenues are kind of a crapshoot because you got to kind of guess it out. But if you're in a market that has a competitor that's doing the same thing, just by simple observation, you can almost figure out what they're doing in sales.
Right.
It's not that hard to do. And if you're not, you don't think you can do that, then find someone in a different market who's doing basically the same thing and talk to them and try to figure out what they're doing in sales.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you're in Miramichi, a market that you might want to look at is Woodstock, and just call up, if you're a plumber in Miramichi and you want to start a plumbing business, Figure out who the plumber is in Woodstock, introduce yourself. Listen, I want to start up a business in Miramichi. Can you tell me what kind of revenues you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you can get a pretty good idea just based on that on a, we call it pro forma. It's really called budgeting. What kind of sales you'll do.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, of course, there are factors that you don't know, like, you know, how many competitors are in Woodstock? How long has that guy been in business or that girl been in business? And so you got to kind of figure that part out. And it is a crapshoot and it's a guessing game to some extent, but at least you have something to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And then the expenses side, well, it's pretty simple. You know, if you're selling a product, you know what you're going to pay for it. Well, that's what we call cost of goods sold or gross margin, the difference between what you sell it for and what you paid for it. And then, you know, you've got insurance, you got vehicle expenses. That stuff's easy. You can figure that out very, very quickly just by making some calls.
Right.
But at the end of so getting back to your question, once you figure out, okay, is this idea profitable given a certain level of revenues? Well, first question you should ask yourself. Second question is, okay, how am I going to make this successful? So do I need employees? Well, a lot of small business start out, they don't need employees. Great. So then there are no salary expenses besides what you take out of your business. Right. There are programs available, whether it's a self-employment benefits program in New Brunswick that basically alleviates some of that cost. If you don't qualify, then you got to make sure you have enough money available at the end of each month that you can put food on your own table. Mm-hmm. Then it's, well, how am I going to grow this business? How are people going to find out about me? So what's your strategy on marketing? Okay. What's your strategy in operations? Like, okay, you're a plumber. Well, is there a certain segment that you're going to go after? You're going to go after commercial. You're going to go after residential. You're going to start selling products. You got to figure out where you're going to find your groove. Like, what market you're going to go after? Are you going to serve everybody? Well, you're going to try to, but really you'll find, and that sometimes that just takes time to get into the business and figure out where you're finding opportunity. And then you can focus in on that. But yeah, so marketing side, financial side, strategically. So I kind of combine strategy and marketing together because they kind of go hand in hand.
Right. Yes.
How are you going to communicate to the market that you're different than everybody else? Now, if you're alone, there's no competitors in your market, you've got an advantage already because no one's there. Maybe somebody's, getting the services or the product 100 miles away or 100 kilometers away. So you have the opportunity right away because the market's empty. It's looking for your product or service. Mm-hmm. And how do you figure that out? Well, probably because in a similar size market, they already have it and they're quite successful with it. And I think about the mystery rooms. You remember the mystery rooms when they were all, I think you had them in Miramichi?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
I think there still is one here. Yeah. Right.
So they kind of went like this and then they went like this. And then there a bunch of competitors came in and they kind of worked it out. And then, one's left standing. I remember talking to somebody in one of the markets in New Brunswick about the mystery room. She's like, I'm the only one. I'm like, that's great. You won't be one day. So you better figure out how you are better than everybody else. She goes, oh, I'm just better. Like, no, how are you going to communicate that? Because you just can't come out and say you're better. No one will believe you. Mm-hmm. So how are you going to do that? Like, what's that strategy that's going to get people feeling, oh no, she's the best, right? Without ever saying it. Mm-hmm. And it comes from the heart. It comes from emotion. It comes from, how you're going to communicate that through your marketing message and your strategies. And so, and I've seen there's a mystery room here, not very far from where I live. They opened with great fanfare, and I remember going to it. And it was fun. I mean, there's no question it was fun, but I didn't go back. Mm-hmm. Right. And why didn't I go back? Well, because it just wasn't something that I'm going to do every day. Right. And I talked to the owner about 2 months ago, and he was like, no, we've let that go. We're refocusing our energies over here now. The mystery room just took up too much time, too much room. Well, if you would have looked at his original business plan, it was all based on the mystery room. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So some of that is trial and error and figuring out your, where your comfort zone or where your groove is. And I mean, there's other areas of the business plan that you can look at. I mean, you got to look at competitors. Like if you haven't done your homework, there's lots of resources out there to define who your competitors are. And never forget that competitors aren't just, what am I trying to think of a business? Oh, like a restaurant. Yeah. Let's say you want to open a breakfast restaurant. Well, if you're in a market like Woodstock and you say, well, there's no breakfast restaurants in Woodstock, of course there are.
Mhm.
Of course there are. There's McDonald's. You might not think of McDonald's as a breakfast restaurant, but they sell stuff that is served at breakfast. There's
Mhm.
A&W. I think there's an A&W in Woodstock. Um, there's family restaurants that serve breakfast for a period of time. And then there's everyone else. Like, it's an indirect competitor, but people eat breakfast at home.
Mhm.
Well, that's a competitor, right? Whether you like it or not. So that's probably your biggest competitor, that people choose to eat at home instead of eating in a restaurant. So you have to remember there's direct, like right on, head on direct competitors. And then there's maybe a little level below that serve the same product in a different way. And then there's the indirect customer or indirect competitor. So you want to identify all of that and understand, okay, how am I going to convert, because that's what really, when you're coming into the market, you're trying to do. You're trying to steal people from other competitors. How
Mhm.
am I going to convert them, or how am I going to grow the market?
Right. Yeah. And that's so, so true. And you mentioned mystery rooms, but I also was coming to mind of like the frozen yogurt places. There
Oh,
was
exactly.
one, and then there was 1,000, and now there's and now there's one or sometimes none, right? Or gyms, right? The same thing as fitness facilities. And I always say that, one fitness facility opens up and everybody flocks there, and then a new one, and then everybody flocks over here because it's shiny and new, right? And, people always used to say to me, why do I choose the gym that I choose? And I always said it's because it's close to home and it was inexpensive, right? Because but if I wanted shiny and new, then I would continue to follow the ones that opened, right? And we see that all the time. I wanted to touch on, you talked about human resources and about, how many employees do you need, or do you need any starting out? How important is it to get that right? Now you work on you yourself work on your own, but you also had, many employees at your places of business. But I guess major a pitfall is that when people all of a sudden think that, um, they're going to pay themselves a huge salary. And you and I have talked about this before, when you try to like work out the money, right? And at the end, they're like, you're going to make $7 an hour. And they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. Right. So is that a major pitfall when people start out, that they don't focus on their employees or how much they're going to pay themselves?
Yeah, it's usually the first thing. Like, and people fall under prey. And again, when I say people, it's in my experience when I've talked to startups, they fall under prey that they don't need to pay themselves. And they might be right. There, like I said earlier, there's a program called the Self-Employment Benefits Program here in New Brunswick that the province kind of quasi helps out with a certain amount of salary if you qualify.
Mhm.
And so the first year, that's kind of good. It's kind of like they kind of like, the program is put in place to prop up the entrepreneur, that they
Right.
can kind of leave cash in their business, which is an amazing program. Back in the day when I started my first business, I took advantage of that program. It was great. But after that first year, they fall under this prey. Oh, well, the business, everyone tells me the business won't make money in the first 3 years or first 2 years or first 5, whatever the number they say. It's like, but how are you going to put food on the table?
Mhm.
And sometimes the answer is, oh, my wife's a doctor. Okay, at least you have a plan, right? As long as you understand that, we've got money coming in from another source, not going to be a problem. At least you understand that. But in year 3, how are you going to put money on the table? Oh, well, businesses don't make money in the first 3 years. Okay, but when do they make money? Like, what's your plan where you actually start converting that into a very viable business? Because in my experience, if you work for free, and I've done this, I've worked for free, you get very demotivated after about year 2, right?
Mhm.
It's like, why am I working so hard? Why am I working 7 days a week, thinking about this business 24 hours a day, when I could be working, in some other job for $15 an hour or $20 an hour, whatever the number is.
Right.
And you get to the point, it's like, you know what, my efforts aren't being rewarded. And that's when demotivation kind of sits in. And, if you have got money invested in it, or maybe you've got your name on the line on a debt, like you start sitting there and thinking, oh, maybe I should just, call it a day and figure out how I'm going to pay this debt, or I'm going to go personally bankrupt, because your plan in the beginning didn't allow for, hey, we got to figure out how we're going to make money.
Right.
And the 2-year mark, and this is my personal opinion, I don't know what books say, because I basically go by my experience and the things that I've gone through, because I've had successes. I've had amazing successes. And I've also had flops. And
Mhm.
I've had businesses that I've lost $250,000. and it hurts. The first time it happens, you're like, oh my God, I can't afford that. I don't,
Mhm.
I'm not all high and mighty and millions of dollars in trust fund, baby. And I don't have that kind of cash.
Mhm.
But you kind of learn through time that everything is ebb and flows, and you make money, you lose money, you make money. You always try to lose less than you make, right?
Yeah.
But if you're starting out and that first business is a flop, and you don't have that support in behind that says, in the 2-year mark, you're not making any money, you give up. People just give up. And I understand why they would give up. They probably should give up if they're at that point. But if their plan was very clear and said in year 2, we're going to make $25,000. The entrepreneur ends up trying to pay, either they do one of two things. They try to pay themselves first, which means it could kill their cash flow.
Mhm.
Right? Because they have a lifestyle that need to support. They've got the boats, the 4-wheelers, the expensive cars. So they try to pay themselves first in order to keep that afloat, which is a total mistake.
Okay.
Because the business really needs to be that baby that you take care of and guide and
Mhm.
grow and try to make it successful. So really, you should never pay yourself first, in my opinion.
Okay.
If your lifestyle is in that side of situation, then you better make sure this business is successful out of the gate, and that's hard to do. Or they pay themselves last. And that was my scenario. I tried to pay myself last, which in some cases it works out really well. And in other cases, after, like I said, the 2-year mark, you're like, I can't do this anymore. I've got to get rid of this business. It's not helping what I'm trying to do going forward.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so true. And you see that sometimes. You see people, jump into a business, and that's why I think it's so important to have these conversations, because, I hear all the time people saying to me, "Oh, I'm starting a business," and I'll just have some quick questions for them, and they sometimes will chat about it, and then sometimes they're like, "Leave me alone. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it," which is totally fine too. But then you talk to them in a year and they're like, "Oh no, I decided not to do that," right? So I think that's why it's important to have these conversations about really setting up. I laugh at my husband all the time because he starts talking about starting a business, and he always starts with the name, what he's going to name it. And then, so I start picking away at it, and in the end, he doesn't want to talk to me anymore because he just wants to focus on the name, the really great name, right? So speaking of names, and let's move on to marketing, because I can't have a conversation with you without talking about marketing. And I've sat through so many great conversations and workshops with you about the topic. What are your top, let's say, 3 tips when businesses are looking at their marketing plans and they kind of don't know where to go? And if they could do 3 things fast, what would you suggest?
Ooh,
Put you on the
fast.
spot.
I put fast equals easy. And
Okay.
in marketing, easy is the wrong thing to do.
All
Right.
right. Well, there's one tip there. Check. You got one tip.
Right.
Don't do it fast.
When you're thinking about your marketing, I mean, you're clearly trying to grow sales, right? And then obviously everybody wants more customers, more money in the bank, blah, blah, blah. Your marketing, you basically have 2 approaches when it comes to marketing. The first one is dangerous, and I never recommend it. But people are successful with it, but you have to understand the pitfalls, and that is be the cheapest in the market, right? So if you think of like a company like Walmart comes in, builds these great big box stores. They profess that they're cheaper than everybody else. Fair enough. I mean, they've killed many businesses over the last 30 years in New Brunswick because of that strategy. And it's just they work on very, very small margins, but they sell a lot of stuff. So because of their volume, they're able to make money doing it.
Right.
If you think about a competitor coming into a market and undercuts the pricing, so whether you're the plumber that, if I don't know what the average wage of a plumber is, but let's say it's $65 an hour, and you decide to be a plumber and you want to charge 40 because everyone else is charges 65. You're going to get business based on the $40, guaranteed. But what you're also doing at the same time is you're devaluing your service. And when you try to create a position, a unique selling proposition, which marketers use, and I'll use a different term. If you're trying to create a value proposition where you're cheap, if you're trying to create a unique voice that you're cheap. Some competitor will figure out that they can lower their price to $40 and get back their customers.
Right.
Or a new entrant will come in and say, well, if he's charging 40, I'll charge 35. And what we call that in marketing is a race to the bottom.
Okay. And
you're just not going to, yes, you'll get customers. I guarantee you'll get customers being cheap, but you're also bringing in a cheap customer. You have to remember that. And if the cheap customer is buying because you're cheap, they will quit on you because you're cheap. You're not cheap enough. Right?
Okay.
You're bringing in the wrong customer.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and I mean, we all want to save money. I get that. I mean, and the mindset of a business owner, everybody wants to save money, but that's not necessarily true, because if everybody wanted to save money, then people wouldn't drive BMWs, right? If everybody wanted to save money, Starbucks wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
Or Apple wouldn't exist, or Harley Davidson wouldn't exist. Like there's a certain point where money, it doesn't play the same factor. And that's the second point. We call them relational versus transactional customers. Basically two types. And we're both. Every single person is cheap on some areas and not on others. Okay. The transactional customer wants the cheap. The relational customer is looking for something a little bit more. Now, if you don't give them something, they'll ask for the price. That's the easy one. But if you give them something more, then price becomes less of a factor. So I'll give you an example. My two kids are in high school. I'm an Apple fan. I'm an Apple fanatic, right? 6 years ago, I bought my first Apple and like a laptop, and I love it so much. My wife wanted to buy a laptop. I promoted Apple. She's like, nope, I want this one. It was cheap. And she has nothing but problems with it. And every time she asks me, and I'm not a techie, she asks me for advice. I'm like, I don't know. I don't understand what Microsoft is doing, right? I can't help you. So she has to go spend money for someone else to fix her problems. Right. My kids are in high school. They all need laptops now in New Brunswick because of the COVID scenario. And I walked into Staples. I didn't look at the $700 laptops. I went immediately over to the MacBook Air. I'm like, give me two of those. And, the 18-year-old kid was like, what color do you want? Silver or gold? That was the biggest question. It wasn't about price. Right. Now, the Apple MacBook is $1,500 after tax. I paid twice as much for the product. I'm not a transactional customer when it comes to laptops, right? Now, that is built up over time with Apple's communications to the marketplace, and they clearly have talked to me, right? Other people would never spend that kind of money on a laptop, and that's their choice. But I have a relationship because I've had such a great experience with my laptop. It's never been into a repair shop. I've never had, updates are easy to do. For me, it's just simple.
So the value was there for you, and the fact that you can now help both your kids if they have a problem with Apple instead of having to take it outside.
Exactly. So I use that example because we forget that sometimes people don't want the lowest price. Now, what do they want? Now, you have to think about Apple as their marketing strategy. They focus on something very different than price. Now, they're a computer company. They're no different than Asus, Lenovo, Dell, and all these other companies. They're just a computer company. Yes, they sell phones and iPads and that. But if you think about just the market of laptop computing, why do I buy from them? Because for me, it's peace of mind. Right. Technology is complicated. I'm not a guy who understands it overly, right? I failed computer science in my first semester at UMB, but it's easy to understand for me. I don't need to open up the hood and understand where the RAM is and how the hard drive works. I'm not that guy. If that guy is, if that guy wants to be able to go in and plug and play and change things around, they probably won't like the Mac because the Mac doesn't allow them to do that easily, right? So my relationship with Apple is very solid. And, when my laptop cuts out, I'll go buy another one. Now, there's obviously a point of friction at some point. Like, I'm not going to buy the $3,000 Apple because I think that, there's other options available within their spectrum of products that I'll pay for. So it's like anything, like, if I'm buying a car, if my budget says that I can only afford $400 a month for a car payment, then I'm not buying a BMW. Even though I may love them, I just can't afford it. So I have to ladder down and say, okay, what is in this target that I can afford that I could really get into? So it might be a relationship with a salesperson. It might be a relationship with a brand. It might be a relationship with the owner of the company that's selling cars.
Right.
But that relationship really ferments. So, when you need to buy a new car and you always buy Hondas, you're probably not going to go check out Hyundai's prices on their equivalent product. You're just going to go to the Honda dealership and say, this is how much money I have. What do you got?
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll make a decision on what car you're going to buy.
Yeah.
But it'll be a Honda.
Right. Yeah. And that's such good advice. And I've heard you talk about this before, and I learn something new every time. And it's really, you almost have to build those two people and say, who am I talking to today? Right. And actually know when they're coming towards you, what are they going to be buying on? Right. And I have you in the back of my mind all the time, because sometimes if I'm in a store and I hear a conversation, I'm thinking, nobody's spending, like so many people spend so much time on one customer and they're not listening to them, right? So it's, you have to almost see them coming and then know how to determine which type of customer they are in order to serve them correctly.
Yeah, well, it's like the example I used to be a marketing director at Pizza Delight Corp, and that's how I kind of got my start in the restaurant business. And the number one question franchisees get on a Friday night is, "What's your special?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's not the question you want asked when they call.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to the point where franchisees, and I haven't talked to some of the franchisees in years, but they got to a point on a Friday night that they had two people answering phones. Now, obviously, we've got apps and we've got internet orders and a lot of different mechanisms of people coming in now. But I even noticed in my own family, my wife will call Pizza Delight from time to time, and it's like, "What's your special?"
Yeah.
Right. So it's the automatic, I want the cheap product. And then the second thing that would get said on that same call is, "Okay, I'll call you back."
Yeah.
You're only going to call back because you're going to check out Greco or whatever other competitor in the market to find out their stuff is cheaper.
Yeah.
You're not a relational buyer. If you're a relational buyer, yeah, you might want to save a couple bucks, but you're buying from Pizza Delight, right?
Yeah.
Or you're buying from Greco or wherever your relationship is.
Yeah. And if your time is important too, to call around all those places, right? To call around and get them and wait for them, knowing that, and now it's easy that you can just flip on an app and look at the deals. But, years ago when you were calling around, you're like, okay, if you called around for a half an hour, you could have had the pizza here by now, right? So your time is important as well, even as a customer.
But the transactional customer doesn't care about their time.
Okay.
They look at that as part of the process of the purchase.
Okay.
Way back in the day, I was, probably second job at a university. We had a receptionist, and she would go to Moncton on Saturdays on her day off to buy pop, because pop was free in the office. And she'd have all these flyers on her desk on Friday, and she'd be looking where the sales were that weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And she would spend the entire day going from Walmart, Shoppers, Superstore, Sobeys to save 50 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And it was part of her job, and she liked doing it because she felt that she was helping the company save a couple of bucks.
Mm-hmm.
She spent a whole Saturday doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
And I mean, I'm sure she did that in her own life as well, like how she bought pop or whatever other product where she was transactional on. Yeah. So we have to know that we are relational and transactional. Now, the relational customer, from a strategy perspective, you better come out and say something different to your market. Because if you're saying the same thing, your market's going to assume you're just like the others, and then they're going to default to price. Right. You're going to force them to default to price, and that's not what we want them to do. Mm-hmm. We want them to say, okay, this person's better. This person, I like what they have to say. I really associate myself with this brand, with this company, with this person. And how you do that, you ask me for easy tips. Mm-hmm. How you do that is you be real. Mm-hmm. You start being vulnerable. You don't have to say all the right things. You just have to be yourself. Right. People connect. Like, we connect to people every day. Mm-hmm. Well, how do you connect to brands? It's the exact same way. 95% of stuff that's said in the market, whether it's on social media, whether it's on TV, the radio, it's all garbage. They're trying to throw things down your throat. Come buy from me. We are the best. I don't believe you anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? But when someone comes out and has a message that's believable, that's real, that's authentic, then I have an opportunity to connect with somebody. And that's what the relational buyer is looking for, a connection.
Amazing. Well, you and I could chat all day, and these are some excellent golden nuggets that you've given everyone watching this morning. I appreciate your time. I know this is to be continued. I will get you back and we'll continue this conversation. Thank you so much for being a part of the show this morning, and I hope you have a great week.
You too, Clarissa. Take care.